Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I'm your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
I just ate several jalapeno slices consecutively. Pretty spicy.
Oh, good. Thank you for the heads up. Would I never guessed that much? Episode 228. It's been a while since we've been on the podcast. Glad to be back. For this one, we're not going to be really covering any of the major news in the video game space. Not that there's a whole lot of it. It's mostly having to do with the terrible stuff happening at Activision Blizzard.
Awful
But I figured,
news.
yeah, awful, yeah, god awful news. I figured we just get back, talk about what we've been playing recently, have that discussion. Maybe also talk about what we're looking forward to in the coming weeks, because we're entering the fray of heavy video game release season. So there's plenty of things to look forward to as well. I guess I first want to start off with a game, the oldest game chronologically that I completed, which was Spiritfarer. Spiritfarer is a game that I talked about, I think, E3 2020 when it was first displayed. This really dope indie game, 2D adventure. It's equal parts relationship builder and equal parts like ship management. So the way the game works is you have this ship that you upgrade. You put different types of buildings on it. So you'll have like a blacksmith station. You'll have like gardens. You'll have farms. All this different stuff that you're managing, and all of them produce resources for you that you use to either make stuff in terms of food for your passengers on the vessel, or to create other buildings, or upgrade your buildings, or upgrade your ship. And with your ship, you not only upgrade the size of it so you can fit more stuff on it, both vertically and horizontally, you also upgrade the hull, which is the front of the ship, Dom. So you can upgrade it to get lanterns, which you use to go past this barrier of fog to get to new locations. There's another barrier that's an ice wall, right? So you have to get this like ice breaking thing on your ship. So it's the progression in the game is based on you getting more buildings that can create resources for you. So it's kind of self-sustaining, so you don't have to go to all these locations to gather the resources. But it's also being able to get these upgrades for your ship to unlock new areas, which then you find new resources and yada yada. Each character in the game is a spirit, and going into this game, what I thought, Dom, was you see the girl, right? The main character is this girl in this big green hat. She's a little like cat creature with her, and all of the other characters that you're ferrying to the afterlife, because that's the whole point of the game. It's called Spiritfarer. This golden gate after you build a strong enough relationship with them, or you go through their personal story of them coming to terms with their own death. I thought it was just that these were anthropomorphic animals, each of them with distinct personalities, and you'd learn about them, and that's the relationship, right? What you come to find out is Stella was an end-of-life caretaker in like real life before she died.
Okay.
So
Okay.
all of these other spirits are reflections of people close to her that died. So you learn that some of them are people that she met in the hospital. Some of them are people that came and visited her at the end of her life when she got cancer. A lot of different things. And each of these characters, they're very much their own unique personalities. There's like a couple of two lions. They end up finding out that there's infidelity in the relationship. So that's a big core of their thing of like the female lion doesn't want the male lion on your boat because she just is upset with him. And you kind of learn their whole backstory. One of the more heartbreaking ones is, well, actually, first, I don't want to spoil this for you. Do you plan on playing this anytime soon, or is it okay if I go a little bit into it?
I don't know. I mean, I
I'm going to spoil one character, right? It's one of the first characters you meet, and the way the game works is as you meet characters, you take them to the afterlife and you get new characters, right? So it kind of goes in like a chronological fashion. This one
okay.
isn't
Let's
too
go
much
with
of a
that then.
spoiler because it's the second spirit you meet. It's this giant toad named Atul, Atul, and he's the one that kind of upgrades your fishing mechanism on your boat to be able to fish. That's one of the resources you have to gather to cook and stuff. And you end up finding out that this was Stella's uncle. And one of the sad things is that by this time, well, actually, I think he's the third character. You've already shepherded two characters into the afterlife, going to the gate, and you're like, okay, he's getting to the end of his life. And the cool thing with them is it's not only you learning about their story, you have to complete kind of like side quests that they have to each of them, and they're all very uniquely different. And once you get to a certain point, you can shepherd them to the afterlife. They're like, okay, I'm ready. I've come to terms with it. but there's also a relationship meter for each of these characters that's built on things they like or dislike in terms of other characters that are on the boat, how you treat them, and also the food you give them. So you can have distinct relationships with them. Like a tool in your on your playthrough, if you don't necessarily caretake that relationship as much, you'll still be able to take him to the afterlife at the set point that I did, but his relationship to you might be different, right? And one of the sad things with him specifically is you don't take him to the afterlife. There's a day-night cycle in the game, and you can sleep on your ship to fast forward time. And what happens is he tells you he's ready to go to the gate, and the next night you sleep in your bed, and it fast forwards to the morning. He's gone. He's disappeared. You end up finding out that this is actually a reflection of the real life thing where Stella's uncle traveled and ended up going missing, and they never found him. So he was just presumed dead.
Goodness.
So it's like they never really got the closure there, right? Because they never found him and he just went missing. So the reflection out in the game in the Spiritfarer world is that he just disappears and you're never able to guide him there. So Stella doesn't get closure, neither does he. And a lot of these cases with these characters is heartbreaking because, like I've said multiple times, it's just about learning to grieve and learning to come to terms with your own mortality. And a lot of these characters have things they're upset about that they did in their life, things they wish they had done, and they all act very differently as they get closer to coming to terms with that. Some of them never really find closure, and they're kind of like pissed off when they get to the point where they just want to be taken to the afterlife. Some of them are dealing with mental issues or diseases that you kind of have, like you're kind of forced into taking him to the afterlife. It's really good. I would say the core of this game in terms of its strength is the storytelling and the relationships you build. The ship management stuff, it can get a little tedious, if I'm being honest, but it never gets to the point where it's overbearing, where it overtakes the enjoyment from building these relationships with these people. And on top of that, when you go to visit all of these islands and different places to gather resources or talk to people or finish quests, it's a platformer in those aspects. So you're jumping around, you're getting different upgrades to double jump or glide, to find new secrets. It's a very deep game, which I didn't expect going in because on the surface I just thought it was like, okay, you're getting these people on. It's a very narrative-driven game where you're talking to these characters and you're just, sailing around the open seas. There's a lot to the game to like, and I recommend it to anybody because the storytelling in it is so good. And the next game me and you are going to get into, Death's Door, deals with the afterlife. This one was emotional, and I wouldn't consider myself the type of person that cries at everything, but I'm also not like a very stern, stone individual who doesn't cry. And by the end of this game, I was weeping because I was not expecting that layer of the real world reflection of the people that she built connections to in the real life. I was just like, okay, I might get emotional because these characters, I like them and they're animals and yada, yada, yada. But when you see the reflection of it being what she actually went through, it's tough. And then they added an additional DLC after the game released. And the DLC is basically her sister who had to watch her die, that connection between them. Because her sister's still alive, but Stella ended up dying, which isn't a spoiler. You learn at the beginning of the game. But yeah, it's a great game. It's very emotional. I would recommend it to any, especially you, Dom. I know the kind of games you like, and like I said, you might not fall in love with the management stuff. I didn't have a problem with it, but I think everything else about the game is good enough to have you deal with that. And the cool thing with it too is the management is as in depth and kind of tedious as you want it to be. So you can travel to these other islands and gather resources, but if you're someone like me who's very particular about things, I set up my ship in a way that it kind of just regulated itself, where I would get all these resources. I didn't have to really go anywhere. And it's kind of up to you how crazy you want things to be in terms of like automation or, not having to travel to different places. I don't know if you have any questions about Spiritfarer, because I know you've been interested in it, and we had talked about it a little bit on Discord.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. It's probably, it sounds like something I'd be really into, especially when you mentioned that the strengths are like, the relationships between each of the different characters. It's not, and then the narrative in general, like that, that's a big deal. Like I like games like that, and that can carry, even if the gameplay or the moment to moment might not be like the most engaging type of stuff. It sounds like it's like more than serviceable to to bring the story to you and those characters. And yeah, that it sounds like deep. Sounds like we just watched this movie actually on Netflix that sounds very similar. I can't remember the title, but I'm gonna have to figure it out and tell you afterwards because that's not about animals or anything, but it has similar themes about like moving out of the afterlife and that kind of thing. But no, I think this will definitely be something. Put it on all the wish lists that I have, right, to all the price tracking tools and stuff that I'm always monitoring. So next time I see this on sale, I'll probably grab it because I don't think this was
It's not Game Pass, no.
Right. And even then, what I'm finding too is like some games are Game Pass, but not everything is Game Pass for PC.
PC, yeah.
It's pretty close. They're pretty similar. But anyway, this is definitely something. As soon as I see an opportunity, I want to try this out. Yeah, we've talked about it a bit now, and it sounds like right up my alley. So
it's basically like the movie, the Disney's Coco, but with animals. I don't know if you've ever seen Coco, the Pixar film.
No,
that's about the afterlife. And yeah, the strongest part about this game is the characters, and then I would say second to that is the platforming of the levels, and then I would say ship management is definitely third. But I don't think it's not terrible. It's serviceable in the game. I just think that people are going to fall in love with those first two aspects, especially the characters and the narrative. And the ship management will always be the gameplay you have to deal with to get to the parts you really like, if that makes sense, you know? Mm-hmm. But I do think it helps make it feel like a complete experience, because without that ship management stuff, I think it wouldn't be as engaging, and maybe you would rather shift towards maybe watching a Let's Play on YouTube, because it is engaging enough for you to want to do the stuff. Like I said, I just don't think it's the strength of Spiritfarer. And looking at their Twitter account after I beat the game, there's multiple other free updates that are coming to it. And you can tell they're going to be adding more spirits to the game, which is really cool. And they're going to be adding other events. So that's one thing I didn't talk about. So each character, Dom, has an event you can do that gives you a particular special resource that you can only get for that event. And the way it works is when you have that character on your boat, whenever a certain thing happens, a tool, for instance, the uncle, right? Whenever you pass through an area that's thunderstorming, he has an event you can do where you gather lightning in a bottle by lightning shooting down onto your ship, and you have to run around and get there in time to catch it, right? These little neat mini games. And for him, when he disappears, anytime that event pops up again, you can activate it. It's just it won't be him, right? And that kind of goes to the bummer of feeling the loss of these characters, because you'll need that resource and you go to do the event, but you don't have that engagement with that character anymore. So it makes you reflect on that of like, oh, damn, like he's not here anymore to get excited about doing this event, or this person isn't here to engage in that. It's really, I was going to say the word heartwarming, but it's like the opposite of that. Like it really makes you emotionally engaged, and it makes you feel as if, you know, life matters in a lot of ways, and you need to understand that, like, there's nothing wrong with being upset about the decisions you made in life, but it's also you have to come to terms with you're just human and people make mistakes, right? And that's one of the themes with that couple I was talking about, is the male character at this point, the male lion. You can already tell that he understands how bad he was in that relationship with her, and he ends up wanting to go to the afterlife simply because he knows that his presence is bothering her. It's just a lot of really interesting dynamics and heartbreaking stuff. And yeah, as the kids say these days, Dom, it got me in my feels, and it probably will to you too. I mean, the game has a hug mechanic, and you can go up to any character anytime and hug them. And obviously with different personalities, that plays differently. Some are like, oh, thank you for the hug. Others like, no, thank you. I just had a blast with it. I'm glad there's additional content coming. I cannot wait for new spirits to be added. One of the neat things is the last spirit you get is like a character that sticks with you, and they're really into like Dungeons and Dragons, and their event is really neat because it plays off of Dungeons and Dragons and playing with XP and stuff. And like I said, I don't want to spoil it too much for you, but they did a great job with it. Thunder Lotus is a developer. I believe it's currently like $20. In my opinion, it's definitely worth that. On sale, very clearly worth that. But yeah, check out Spiritfarer if you haven't. Incredible game. Love it. Next up, get to my second game. And what were you gonna say?
No, nothing. Go ahead.
Sorry. Next up is my second game. Dom, I know you've played around with it a little bit, and this one is one I definitely want to avoid spoilers for. Death's Door. This is a game that we had highlighted off of E3. Incredible looking Zelda meets Souls-like game with the little crow. You're working for this agency where you have to go and gather spirits. Crows are the only ones that don't die, so therefore you're tasked with going out and capturing the spirits of creatures and entities that are dying. The hub world where you talk to other crows, and it's very sterile, business-like aesthetic where it's black and white. And then when you go into the regular worlds, they're full color, beautiful designs. Each world feels distinctly its own.
So like that hub world, by the way, it's really simple, but it's so cool. Like, and there's a couple other characters you can talk to, and like some of them are just typing away, and it's like, it's so cool. Like, that's like up there in like some of the cooler hub worlds or whatever, where the subject matter is like, it's so serious. Like, you're talking about, like, this is this business of crows, like basically reaping people or whatever, like killing people or moving them to the afterlife or whatever. But yet it's like this cute little hub world, and everyone's got their little typewriters and just kind of poking away with their little, I don't know. It's just, something about it was really cool to me.
The moment you get to that first level to get your first spirit, and you see the little like green flower guys that follow you around, just so adorable, so cute. Mm-hmm. And it juxtaposes that very serious, sterile tone of that hub world. And the world building that you do automatically is super cool. Like, you get into the game and it just is cool. Like, it's hard to describe. It just having the floating doors in the background with it kind of, gradiently like fading out and being a little bit out of focus in the way that it is, really lends itself to it feeling like you're kind of on your heels. You don't know exactly what's going on. And then what happens is you defeat your first boss. It's kind of the boss where you learn the mechanics of, and this is one thing I want to talk about real quick, is one of my favorite parts of this game, Dom, is the visual language of this game, in that every boss doesn't have a health bar at all. You're not looking at a health bar to deteriorate this boss's life to zero. It's visual feedback. So the more damage you do to a boss, the more their body starts cracking with this like neon pink in their body, coming out from their body, this light, which is, lore wise, it seems to be their spirit. And obviously, as you get closer and closer to defeating the boss, it's just cracked completely. And I think it lends itself to the difficulty in the game in a way, Dom, because you never know exactly how close you are to defeating the boss. You're like, maybe it's one hit, maybe it's three, I don't know. So it's that risk-reward system of, do I just risk it and just go ham, take a couple of hits, and just see if I can finish off this boss or this enemy? How do you feel about that visual feedback of not having that bar underneath or having to worry about that?
It looks really cool, and it works well with what it's doing, where it's like, yeah, it's really ambiguous and you're not sure until eventually you start to see like some small cracks, right? But it's just the slightest indication of you're in this sort of range. And so, yeah, it makes you play differently. It's not like, sometimes in Dark Souls, for example, like you might go for that last hit when you can see like, oh, the boss has exactly one hit's worth of health left, right? You might take a risk. But here it's like, you're probably going to play more conservatively because you don't know exactly how many hits are left. I like the way that it looks, and like it's different. I can definitely appreciate that. But maybe it's just because in general, a lot of the bosses just are so spongy and just take so many hits, which kind of goes into the only other thing that I don't even think it's a criticism necessarily, but just something worth pointing out is like your upgrades, at least so far for me, have been like kind of slow to, there's good upgrades of like roll faster, hit harder, that kind of stuff. And they're just few and far between so far, which maybe is playing into like, why did this boss feels like it's taken 200 hits? But also maybe that's just because there's no health bar. It feels like 200 hits and it's actually less. I don't know. But
yeah, and I don't
think these are bad things. It's just observations, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think the comparison to Legend of Zelda in that instance kind of hurts it in a sense, because people are used to getting those hard upgrades at a certain level, even with the Souls games, right, of the RPG systems of leveling up at a rather steady pace. I just think that isn't this developer's MO in terms of the way they design. Like even with Titan Souls, right? Titan Souls wasn't focused on upgrading, it was focused on getting better at the game and getting very good at the core mechanics of it. And I think that with Death's Door, they added in that layer of leveling up so it feels more like a complete package. But I don't think it's a game where you should be focusing on the upgrades necessarily as much as you do. I think it's played best if whenever you get sent back to the hub world, you're like, oh, what could I spend it on? Then you realize how much you have to spend and you do it that way. As opposed to, I found the times I was enjoying it the least was when I was like, okay, if I kill X amount of enemies, I just need 5 more points. I have exactly enough. I go back and I upgrade, right? I think that's when I wasn't enjoying myself because I was solely focused on gathering that currency as opposed to just, exploring the game. Because for me, I never had a point in the game where it was overtly difficult to the point where I felt I needed to upgrade. I just never felt that. The game is punishing, the game is tough, but in the same way, it's not necessarily because you don't lose anything on death. It's not a Souls-like in that fashion. So it does walk this fine line of being difficult enough to be frustrating, but it has that, just one more time. I'll get it this time. Because you're always that close. And that's, I think, where the visual feedback kind of helps it in a sense, though, Dom, is because if you had that health bar and you die and you know you weren't close to killing it, that's a bit of a bummer. But if you see a lot of pink and you don't know it's actually a lot of pink and you die to it, you're like, oh, I was so close. And who knows, maybe you weren't close at all, right? But in your mind, you're like, oh, I was so close, and maybe that builds the confidence in you to continue fighting it. I want to mention another criticism, which I wholeheartedly disagree with, but I have seen it as a criticism of this game, which is some people feel it's a little bit obtuse in its design in terms of not having a mini map where people get lost. I didn't really ever feel that. The game isn't so open that you're going to get lost. The game also, in terms of length, it's like a 6-hour experience to 8-hour experience on average. I don't think it's as long for you to forget where you've been or forget stuff. And honestly, I think the reason people got lost is I don't think people are giving this game enough credit when it comes to the narrative and the dialogue where they're not paying attention. Because the moment that giant crow tells you to go kill the 3 souls, he points out what direction relatively you need to go, and he kind of explains that you need to come back here to go face all of these souls, right? This is like the secondary hub. There's the hub world where you upgrade, the sterile business place, but then the cemetery, right? The Lost Cemetery, I believe is what it's called, is like the gameplay hub, where it's kind of branches off into everything. It's the, what's the starting area in the first Dark Souls?
Firelink Shrine, or the...
Yeah, it's the Firelink Shrine of Death's Door, essentially. Where you split off to go in different directions to do stuff. I never felt lost. I never felt it was obtuse. In terms of level design, it's great because it does do the Souls thing of, hey, this actually loops around and unlocks a checkpoint and an open area for you to get here. I do like in the way Zelda does this, Dom, because Zelda obviously has some loose Metroidvania elements of like you see a thing, oh, I can't get there, you get an upgrade later, an item, right? And then you can actually access that point to get something in there, a heart piece or whatever. If this game does that too, where it'll let you, there's some areas where, say you get the firepower, right? Oh, I'll be able to get through this area with the firepower. Oh, the secondary area needs this other upgrade to get through here. Let me check mark that in my mind. When I get that thing, I can come back and do that. One thing you don't know about yet, and this isn't a spoiler, but it's really cool, is that each of the 4 upgrades you have, the top left where you have the bow, and you just beat the grandma, right? At the urn, the witch urn. So you have the firepower, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's 4 upgrades you have in the game. I'm not going to spoil the other 2, but all 4 of them, their main upgrade you get for them to make them stronger is a boss fight you find in the world that's in like a secret area, and each one has its own boss, and you have to defeat it in its own little separate arena, which I think is pretty cool. And that is different than the upgrades we were talking about. The upgrades Dom and I were talking about earlier are for like attack damage, movement speed, magic damage, and what's the other one?
It's like charge
stamina.
speed.
Yeah. And then there's the 2 main upgrade paths for your health and your magic, the amount of times you could use your secondary ability. And those ones are found like at these upgrade shrines, which are much more difficult than the points you acquire. I had a blast with the game. Like I mentioned earlier, Dom is 1/3 of the way through, so I'm actually curious to get your impression since you haven't finished it yet. For me, it's probably thinking of everything I've played, and keep in mind I don't have a PS5, so I didn't play Ratchet, I didn't play Returnal. My list for 2021 is a lot more barren than a lot of people's. It's probably up there right now as my game of the year. Obviously, we're heading into the heavy section of release dates for video games coming up in 2021, so who knows, it will change, it might not. But I absolutely loved it. I'm close to getting the final achievement, which requires you to play through the entire game with that umbrella. A bit tough. But yeah, I love this game. I think this is a great natural evolution for the developers, and the name's escaping me right now. The Titan Souls devs. What is it?
Is there a V in there?
Let me pull it up real quick because I want to give them the credit for this game that they developed. Death's Door. I should have come correct with it already on me. Acid Nerve. I knew it was something with an A. Acid Nerve. Yeah, this is great.
There's a V in there too.
And they've earned my trust to the point we talked about this with Playdead before on the podcast. Everything in me wants them to do a follow-up sequel to this game, but in the same time, if they were able to make the jump from Titan Souls to this, if they were to do something completely different and kind of evolve again, I'd be pretty stoked about whatever that is. Death's Door on its own is a self-contained story enough that I'd be fine if nothing ever existed in it. But like we talked about with the world building from the jump, as the game goes on, all the stuff you learn, I just want to hop back into this world again for a brand new experience. And we'll see what happens. But for you, somebody who's only relatively 1/4 to 1/3 through the game, outside of your criticisms, what are some things you want to point out? Maybe stuff I missed, or things you're really enjoying?
Yeah, I think one additional big thing so far is the characters and the conversations are funny and like charming and cool.
Yeah.
Not just with those initial crows that we talked about in the hub world, but you meet a character who has a pot for a head, and thus they introduce him, and it's I guess I won't spoil it if you can't figure it out already. But anyway,
that's the thing that real quick I want to chime in. The character intros, the stylized way they do it is really cool. I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And just all the characters, like they say the weirdest, like goofiest shit, and it's pretty funny. And you're just like, I just like found myself like, oh my goodness. Even like after that first boss, or not the first one, but the grandma, right? The Wyche. They have a bit of a funeral for her, and it's without spoiling everything about it, it's pretty funny, like what the characters say about her and stuff. And then her story itself was actually kind of sad in a sense, but so yeah, all the story and the dialogue I've seen so far is like really engaging, and I like that too. But then yeah, I'd agree with everything you said. Like the combat it's not really. I don't really even want to call it like overly hard, because it's just kind of takes like a second or two of learning a rhythm, and then like it builds. So far it's building, but it's not overly difficult. It is like you said, it's not something where a bunch of grinding is going to help you. You kind of just have to learn.
It's like the perfect amount of simplistic design.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's hard to explain now that I try, but it is like simple yet not. It's really well done. And then of course, like the art style and the world itself, like it just looks so nice and it feels so cool to look around in. I also had zero problem navigating thus far, because it's not a huge, it's small, and there's even signs of like, because yeah, that larger crow says, oh, you should go to the witch's house first. Like, okay, and he says east or something, and then I'm like, oh shoot, I think this way's east. Go in that direction. Read the first sign. And
did you ever accidentally cut one of the wooden signs?
Yeah, and then it cuts the text in half.
Yeah,
that was cool. Funny. That got me, because I didn't mean to do it, and then I was like, oh crap, now I can't read this anymore. I just had to kind of insinuate. But yeah, that was a neat touch. But this game is awesome, and out of what's come out this year, my favorite thing I've played, I think easily. I've not played Returnal either, but yeah, and there's a lot more coming this fall too, of course. But yeah, I'm adoring this so far, and yeah, it's just fun, and I'm to your point of what they might do next, like keep thinking about Returnal, like keep making it bigger. Maybe take those same concepts and make it bigger, and then maybe you make the next Dark Souls, basically. that might be cool. I would certainly trust them at this point. So
I think their next game, they're going to get a big paycheck from somebody. Like, somebody's going to back the project because of how...
yeah,
Like, Titan Souls was very successful, but on a very, I think, micro scale. Death's Door seems to be, like, their actual, like, coming out party in a major way. And, you know, it's funny, when you look at the style of this game and you play it, to me, as much as people love, you know, Salt and Sanctuary, or what's the other 2D Souls-like game that people really liked?
Hollow Knight,
Blasphemous.
Blasphemous.
I'm taking the ones with like the really close Souls-like aesthetic. Like, Hollow Knight is very Souls-like, but it's very much its own thing in terms of its visuals. This game, outside of the crows, when you're playing in these levels, it's what I would imagine like an indie Souls game would look like. If you're like, hey, what is, you know, imagine what an indie Souls game would look like. It's this. A lot of the aesthetics are the same. There's a lot of nods to Souls. I mean, hell, you come across one of the buildings near that giant crow that you can't access that's like locked off, and on the top it's a turquoise bell, which is like almost the same thing as like the first Dark Souls after you defeat the gargoyles. There's a lot of really cool nods in there. I'm glad that I enjoyed it as much as I did. We, you know, in a world post Cyberpunk, Dom, it's the hype meter for things that you're excited for could, you know, as they said in the MCU, your joy turned to ash in your mouth, right? It's like you're so excited for something comes out and it just doesn't live up to it. And it's one thing for a game to be like mediocre, but then it's another thing for it to just be unplayable or broken or bad, right? And I think for the developer's sake, we as a community of gamers have to do a better job of like celebrating games that met or exceeded expectations, because that isn't a given. Even look at CD Projekt Red, a developer on top of the world, trusted by everybody. No chance Cyberpunk doesn't come out and do great things. And then we come to find out that everything wasn't great behind the scenes, and it releases and it doesn't meet those expectations. So it isn't a given. Like, even your most beloved studios could have issues that you don't know about, and a game could come out and not meet your expectations, right? So it's just dope that we saw this game at E3. People got excited and it came out and delivered. I don't know if it'll be in Game of the Year discussions like overall when we get to like the Game Awards and stuff, just because we have an onslaught. But I do think it's almost a shoo-in to be one of the top nominees for Indie Game of the Year. I think that's almost guaranteed. I don't know if anything is going to come. Like, I don't think 5 indie games are going to come out by the end of the year and overtake this. I think this is going to be in the conversation no matter what.
What are 5 games in general that could be better than this year? Halo?
There's Halo.
Returnal? Maybe Ratchet?
Returnal, Ratchet. Horizon got pushed. Forza, but racing games don't get Game of the Year consideration.
It's like sad.
Battlefield won't get it because shooters don't do that unless it's like something on a grand scale like Halo, right? Far Cry won't. I think at best Far Cry is like an 8, so I doubt that. I'm looking at a list of video game releases. I kind of want to get into this afterwards. Is there any other things you played in our time off that you wanted to mention before we move on?
Actually, yeah, a couple. Well, I already talked a lot about Persona, so I'll skip that for now. But
okay,
that could be an entire year's worth of a podcast to talk about that game. It's great. By the way, I'll just leave it at that. But I also I'm just about done with a Switch game that I grabbed for like $3 called Blossom Tales.
Well, I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
It's a couple of years old at this point, actually, and it's basically a Link to the Past. You know, a clone of that, but a smaller scale, and
okay.
It knows that's what it's doing, and it you know, kind of like we just talked about with Death's Door, it points out and makes little jokes about it, what it's, you know, inspired from, and it's basically that. It's just a top-down 2D, you know, Zelda-like game. The neat twist on it is the narrator is a grandfather telling the story to his 2 granddaughters. And so that's how the premise is set up. That's how the game starts. And then throughout, all the exposition is, you know, grandpa, and then it gives the text of how it goes. And then even throughout the game, sometimes you'll open up a new panel of the screen, right? And then it'll start doing some dialogue. And then the grandpa will say, and then Lily found a big, and then one of the little kids will interrupt, house made of candy. And then all of a sudden it appears on the screen, right? Because they're telling the story as it happens. And the other little kid will be like, no, it was a a laboratory or something. I'm making this up at this point. And then it would change right on screen to something else, which is like, it's been funny. And there's a couple times it's done that so far, which is really cute, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's not too much to write home about. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. But I've been having it's a nice little bit of fun, pretty easy. And it actually does one thing better than any Zelda game so far, which is the currency actually has meaning. Because that's like the one thing every Zelda game kind of like is like, what's the point of all these coins? It's like you can buy a couple upgrades maybe, but like games are easy enough usually that you don't need to be buying fairies and health potions or whatever else. And so like in this game, they actually do a better job of making the money matter more. There's different upgrades and different side quests that you need money for, and it's constantly a resource that actually means something. So that's actually one thing it's done better than the other Zelda games. So, but yeah, I just wanted
some
to bring
screenshots. And what you said, I think the best thing this game has going for it is it knows what it is. Like it's not trying to be something else. Like it knows the nostalgia play it's making for people. It looks charming. Like it looks like the moment you said what it was, I kind of had a mental image and it meets that. It's like, yeah, this is what it is. It's classic Zelda. That's cool. Glad you're enjoying it.
And it's small. I'm like just at the end now, and I think I spent like 3-4 hours or something. So it's I think 3 or 4. No, I'm sorry, on the 4th dungeon now, and they're pretty straightforward. It's like you said, it knows what it is and what it's doing. But I had a nice little time with it. It's kind of really happy.
It has a subtitle, so I wonder if they're working on a sequel to it or something. So it's called, the full title of the game is called Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King. Mm-hmm. So, or maybe this is a different game than no, it is the same one.
That's it.
And looking at its reviews, when it came out, it's hovering in the 80s on both OpenCritic and Metacritic. So I think that's really good for a game like this, where it's, just trying to be a classic experience people are yearning for. Slightly different, but obviously a lot of those same nostalgia plays why people fell in love with classic Zelda. That's cool.
It was also, it also came out, I believe, like first on Switch. Maybe it was on PC before, and it was when, like, I believe in the Switch's first year, when everyone was looking for stuff to buy on their Switch. So I think it probably benefited from that a little bit.
Yeah, March 28th, 2017. So it was like right there
right
at the release. Yeah.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, I knew I had that memory, but that's really been it. I didn't play any of Infinite myself, but I did watch quite a bit of Andy Cortez in the Halo Tech event or whatever. And man, it was like, it's so simple. It's like, 2 maps or whatever, and like bots and like limited guns, no vehicles. So it's like the most scaled down like tech demo basically of a beta, whatever they're calling it. Yet it looked really good. It looks like so much fun.
Oh,
and
I know.
Just watching, I'm like, oh, this looks satisfying as shit. Like, oh, I got like an itch. Like I was 13 again, and I want to play Halo all of a sudden.
It really feels like that experience when you think about you think about playing classic Halo 2, and in your memory it's like, oh yeah, it's modern, it'll fit right, and I can go back and play it. It fits in with modern Call of Duty or all this stuff, and you actually go back and play it, and it's not that. It's slower, just doesn't feel like a modern video game. For as much as we love it, and we are probably more forgiving of it because of the nostalgia play, this Halo Infinite feels like what you remember Halo 2 or Halo 3 feeling like, on top of the fact that it has those modern additions of sprinting, which is huge. You need that in a modern FPS. And then the aim down sights, which is something people take for granted. It just looks incredible. They did a very good job of breadcrumbing it, where they started off where you were playing average bots, then they added the ODST bots, then they added the Spartan bots, and then for like a 2-hour gap, they added 4v4 PvP Slayer. Get people just a little taste of what it's like to play. And they killed it. I do think they're still concerned about the campaign, considering we haven't seen a whole lot of it. And not concerned whether, who knows if it'll be good or bad. But concern is like, is it launching as a complete package? Because now with all this hype built around the multiplayer and it being free to play, they could split it off and do Halo multiplayer this fall and then hold off that campaign. I hope they don't do that, and my gut tells me they won't. But if it comes out that is the case, I wouldn't be that surprised. But I'm with you. I watched so much of it, and God, I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Especially in a time currently where it's tough to play Warzone or any Call of Duty based on not only the Activision Blizzard stuff that's happening from a moral perspective. We can't expect everybody to have that same moral outlook on not playing Activision Blizzard games. But in the same sense, I don't know how familiar you are, Dom, with the state of Warzone as like a game itself separated from that.
No,
All of the top
what's going on?
streamers are kind of moving on. Nick Merckx, who's like the number one Warzone streamer, has recently started playing Apex Legends a bunch. Tim the Tatman, a lot of these big streamers who were Warzone was their jam. Call of Duty, you know how big Call of Duty is. They're one of the only major first-person shooters without a built-in anti-cheat in their game. Think about that. As much money and resources as Activision has, they've never put an anti-cheat into Call of Duty. So what's happening is, it happens to regular players like me where you run into cheaters, but think about not only when you're playing a game by yourself, but you're streaming to millions of, at a time, thousands of people, and you're getting stream sniped, right? So not only are you dealing with people getting into your queue, hunting you down and trying to kill you purposely with stream sniping, which is annoying in and of itself, not really something developers can handle that well. It's kind of like something you have to deal with as a streamer. On top of, you have stream snipers who are cheating, hunting you down, who are being able to shoot through walls or have aimbots or all of this stuff. On top of just general cheaters who aren't even stream sniping you, they have to deal with, right? And all of that stuff builds a playing environment that doesn't feel good. And these streamers have been complaining for a year and some change since Warzone first came out, and Call of Duty hasn't done anything to really fix that. On top of the fact, Dom, and this is something I talked to you about, a concern with Warzone, where's a new map? Like, it's been over a year, and I understand Fortnite's a different beast and they update their map and change it all the time. But if you want to stay relevant in the modern age, especially with Battle Royales, you have to have something refreshing and new. And the refresh they had at the beginning of this year added new points of interest on the current map, Dom. So like a construction area actually turned into a fully built building, or a farm area turned into something else, right? So there were subtle changes around the map, but the map itself, its overall layout and most of its geography didn't change. And all of this stuff, in addition to the Activision Blizzard stuff, has culminated in people just moving on from the game. I currently don't play Warzone because of the moral standpoint I have. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. I've been playing Apex, having a good time. But looking down the end of the year, we have Battlefield coming out, which that has all of its own concerns, being 60 and only multiplayer only. Well, 70. And then Halo coming out free. If there's any time for Halo to strike and hit the ground running, it coming out free to play this fall with everything surrounding Call of Duty, with Battlefield being weird, this Halo could be in a tremendous place by the end of this year, and I'm excited. I'm so excited.
Yeah, the fun, or I don't want to say funny, whatever. The other weird thing to think about is it's now August, and we don't know anything about the annual Call of Duty game, and now it's already like, why is it taking this long for them to announce it? But now it's like, well, they definitely can't announce it now. They gotta let some of this some of their problems blow over as best they can before they want to try to, market a new game, which is a conversation in and of itself. But it's kind of, how does that play into that conversation? Where does that fit into this landscape of this game we don't know really much about, that's supposed to come out probably in a couple months?
Well, and then the domino, right, of like, from everything Phil said, I would put money on the moment we get the Call of Duty release date, within 48 hours we get Halo's release date.
Oh,
because they've kind of been firm on that, of just waiting for that. And with Call of Duty, who knows if they make a giant announcement, because from what we've heard, they might announce the game in Warzone. But at that same point, if the top streamers in the world aren't playing your game, that's the whole point of doing it in the game, right? Is so people are watching these streamers and they announce a new Call of Duty, and that's how you build hype. But if all of these streamers aren't playing your game right now, then an in-game event is kind of, it won't be pointless necessarily, but it's not going to have the same, like, energy to it as you would normally have. They're just in a weird place, deservedly so. They've kind of earned that, the publisher, not the developers. But yeah, it's very weird. We were talking about what could take over Death's Door in terms of game of the year, so let's talk about some of the games that are coming for the rest of the year since we're entering this fray real quick. We won't spend too much time on it. August is pretty huge, especially if you're an Xbox gamer. We got Hades making its way over on the 13th, which I'm excited for. I finally got to play Hades. Road 96, which is that indie game that's like alternate narrative paths depending on what you choose. That comes out on the 16th. 12 Minutes on the 19th. Game Pass, baby. That game looks so good. That's a Game of the Year contender, I think, Dom, for sure.
Good point. Forgot about that one.
Especially with the actors that are in that game. Going to be dope. Madden 22 on the 20th. Kena Bridge of Spirits on the 24th, which
yeah,
that game can go either way with it being a film studio's first game. I think the animation in that game is going to be top notch, and I think maybe even the storytelling will be good. How is that gameplay going to be? And where does it land on the spectrum comparing against something like Spiritfarer, where I talked about how that ship gameplay stuff is kind of the weakness of it. I wouldn't be surprised if with Kena the gameplay is the weakest part of it because of the background of the developers, and this might be a learning thing for them. Maybe Kena 2 nails more of the gameplay, but I would be surprised if this game doesn't nail the emotional storytelling, because it seems like they have that kind of locked in at this point.
Plus, I keep pointing it out, but like it's like a $40 game, so
yeah, budget maybe.
Not that that's bad, but it's like we should keep that in mind when we're like
exactly
grading the scope of the game. That's all.
Yeah, if it were to come out at 70 and it missed some of those marks, or if it was a 5-hour game, that's different. Mm-hmm. And we talk about price doesn't dictate the quality of a game, but from a consumer perspective, it can change judgment or critical perception in relation to how the game is based on its price. It's a very weird amalgamous conversation to have there. The day after Kena, that week, your sports boys are getting Madden 22, PlayStation gamers are getting Kena, and on the 25th, Xbox is getting Psychonauts 2, which I think could be a Game of the Year contender. I want to play Psychonauts 1 before it comes out. And then 2 days later, Switch boys and girls are getting No More Heroes 3. So that week, PlayStation's getting exclusive, Xbox is getting exclusive, and Nintendo. So that's really cool. The 27th is Baldo, which is, I think, like a Zelda-like game, right? That people are excited about with really cool art style. I've
been watching some gameplay of this recently, actually, because something caught my eye, and I was like, oh, I want to see more. And it looks really cool. It does like a Studio Ghibli kind of art style. So I'm curious to see how this one shakes out.
And then 4 days later, the last day of August, we have the Big Con, which is a like 90s side-scrolling indie game. It's very much like an episode of Fresh Prince meets Doug meets Rocko's Modern Life in aesthetic. A lot of different colored triangles with yellow backgrounds. You get that vibe of the 90s. It looks cool. I'm curious. I think that's Game Pass too. Curious to see how the gameplay is and how it shakes out. Speaking of Game Pass, September 1st, Lake, which is that really neat indie game where you're the woman that's a mail delivery driver, and seems like you learn stories about the people you deliver mail to, which looks cool. The 4th, we got NBA.
The sequel.
Huh? Oh, yeah, delivering stuff. Yeah. One thing I don't have marked down is the Death Stranding Director's Edition, but you can look that up if you're interested.
Remaster. So.
Yeah. NBA 2K22 on the 4th. Fist, which is that PlayStation game where you're like a rabbit in a mech suit. I forget what the acronym stands for. Artful Escape on the 9th. Do you remember this one? We've seen it at a couple of Xbox shows. It's like the very colorful music one where the guy's playing the guitar. It's a side-scroller, like psychedelic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This one might be a game of the contender for us too. I don't know if you're hopping into this because I know you haven't played the first two Life is Strange games, but Life is Strange True Colors
that's
coming out on the 10th.
Well, now that we know there's a remaster of the original two coming, that'll be my opportunity. I think no more.
Weird that it's releasing 20 days after, right? Because Life is Strange True Colors comes out on the 10th. The remaster comes out on the 30th. I'm gonna go through some of these quickly. WarioWare Get It Together on the 10th. Tales of Arise. I know Tales fans are excited about that one. A brand new Tales game. Lost in Random, which is the Tim Burton dice RPG game with the girl. It's a claymation. Looks like a Tim Burton movie. Skatebird, neat little indie game people love. You're a bird skating. It's like, the guy from Death's Door took a break when played some Tony Hawk's Underground and wanted to get his skate on. Another Game of the Year contender we forgot about, Deathloop on the 21st of September, my birthday. Hopefully people enjoy that. Once again, I think that we've mentioned this. I think that game could get a 90 or high 80s, but I also think it could get low 80s. I'm very curious to see how that reviews with the multiplayer and all that. 23rd, Game Pass getting another release, Sable, which is that Destiny looking with the specific art style hero's journey where you're going on a pilgrimage as this character. Very like voxel inspired art. Diablo 2 Resurrected, who cares? Screw Activision. Lost Judgment, which is a sequel to Judgment. I also want to throw in, I hate that the word Judgment doesn't have an E after the G in it.
Oh, that's
never made any damn sense to me. We mentioned Life is Strange Remastered on the 30th. If you haven't played Life is Strange or Before the Storm. Get this remaster. It's going to be the best way to play these games. And, play these, play Tell Me Why, and then play True Colors. I love these type of games. They're very unique to what they do, and I'm just glad they exist, and we need to support them.
I was thinking about Tell Me Why the other day, and I love that. I really like that game. I like how we played it too, like a book club. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was a cool experience at the same time. Next up, a game I don't remember, Astria Ascending is coming out on the 30th. I can't place that in my mind. I know people are excited for it, but the name escapes me. The 30th, that really cool arcade racer Hot Wheels Unleashed, which looks way better than it has any right.
Yes, that actually looks really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And we got the big boy month here for video games. October, the 7th, Far Cry 6. The 8th, Metroid Dread, which could be a sneaky game of the year contender, depending on how good it is. Yeah. Back for Blood comes out on the 12th, which I think a beta is currently going as we're recording this on August 5th. Mm-hmm. A Little to the Left, which was that indie game of the woman painting, but across the road, there's an old man in the other window, and it seems like you're just going to watch this old man die of loneliness. It looks super sad. Actually, no, that's a different game. A Little to the Left is the OCD one, where you have to like rearrange pencils in an order and do all of that like OCD stuff. It's like a mini game based game. The one I'm thinking of is called something else. We saw it like 6 times during E3. Battlefield 2042, going to be interesting to see how that plays out without a single player. We talked about this when it was initially announced, Dom. None of my friends are interested in buying this because they can't justify $70 for a multiplayer only game. And I get that. It's going to be an uphill climb, and it would be so good if this game entered day and date in Game Pass. It's going to have a tough time competing with Halo and Call of Duty, and I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. Because Battlefield's always had this issue where even the multiplayer can be good, it just doesn't sell because it's just, I don't know, they make weird decisions. House of Ashes, the 22nd, the next Dark Pictures anthology, which looks really cool. Guardians of the Galaxy, which our friend of the show, Chris Noons, shared a cinematic video for that game, and I'm so excited. Just like with Hot Wheels Unleashed, this game has no right looking as good as it does, and I'm excited for it. And it's going to answer that question of if Avengers was just narrative-focused single-player, would it be any good? And we'll see what happens with Guardians. I have a lot of faith in it, but who knows? We'll see if it meets that. Solar Ash coming out on the 26th, which is a spiritual sequel to, what's the game Andy Cortez from Kind of Funny always talks about?
Hyper Light Drifter. Excellent
Same
game.
yeah. Same. I've yet to play it. Same studio though. Working on this, it feels very much like Pathless, that PS5 game that came out. That's all about movement, right? Kinetic energy moving forward. The 28th, a game that I didn't realize got delayed from September, Riders Republic. This is the massive multiplayer, action sports game where you're riding four-wheelers and bikes and all that stuff. Age of Empires 4 comes out on the 28th. This is a game, I grew up playing Age of Empires, and thank God for Game Pass, because I'm going to download this when it comes out and dabble in it and get a bit of a nostalgic kick. And I wonder if it'll do what Age of Empires people want it to do, Dom. So I don't think they're expecting anything drastic from it, but I hope it meets expectations, because this is going to be the first Age of Empires in like 15, 20 years, right? I think. It's been a while.
That sounds right. They remastered.
Excluding the remasters. Excluding the remasters, like a new Age of Empires. I know a game you're excited for on the 29th, Mario Party Superstars. Hopefully this is the Mario Party game on Switch that fixes all of the mistakes of its dead brother.
I cannot wait.
November, this is a good month for me too. Not because Just Dance comes out on the 4th, but we get Forza Horizon 5 on the 9th, which Playground Games, we know it's going to be incredible. They are the king of the racing game in the modern era. For all of the weebs out there, Shimagami Tensei 5 is coming out on the 12th. Good luck to them. That game looks like a PSP port. I don't understand how Persona was the spin-off, and now Persona looks like the main game, and Shimagami Tensei looks like the spin-off. And then on the 19th, baby, we're getting that Gen 4 remake, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Cannot wait. Super stoked for that. And then December, we have Advance Wars Remake, which I'm super excited for. And then a game that I don't think is coming out, and I think it gets delayed, Dying Light 2. A game everyone is forgetting about because, yeah. So those are the releases for the rest of the year. Some really cool Game of the Year contenders. I'm interested to see how it shakes out. It's going to be very odd to see what ends up rising to the top. And I wonder, the thing that pisses me off sometimes, Dom, is people don't give Sekiro the credit it deserves when it won Game of the Year. Because you're like, oh yeah, it wasn't a great year. It's like, true, you can make the argument that there wasn't a whole lot of like A+ tier games that came out, but it doesn't discredit how incredible Sekiro was, right?
Like Sekiro would be Game of the Year in all but I don't know a couple years in existence. It was that freaking good. It was excellent.
Yeah, it's like the criticism LeBron had for a while where he played in the Eastern Conference in the NBA. People are like, yeah, but a lot of those other teams suck. It's like, he got drafted by the Cavaliers. It's not his fault that other teams in that conference can't like get players. It's not his, you know what I mean?
Plus, you end up playing the best team from the West in the end.
In the finals, exactly. Exactly. That's my, I always have to go a little anti-LeBron slander whenever I get the opportunity to. But on a side note, away from video games, football's coming back, Dom. I can't wait. It's my favorite time of the year.
Me too. I love it.
Cannot wait. But that's it for the first time in a while. Thank you guys for listening. We're on YouTube at Controlled Interest, Twitter, Controlled Interest. It's abbreviated CTRLINT. Individually, Dom is at Dom's Oreos, correct? I don't think you've changed your username.
I have.
What is it?
Now I'm at Obi Dom Kenobi.
Obi Dom Kenobi. I knew you were switching your PSN. I wasn't sure if it was your Twitter too, so I wanted to make sure. I need to update the description too. Don't let me forget. I'm at Jerrad Wyche, I believe. I always forget if I still have the underscore, the dreaded underscore. I will be back next week. We're going to be on a regular schedule. For those who care to know, I just had to deal with real life stuff for a bit. But we're back on track. We're going to be back every week, hopefully, or as often as we can be, as normal. And thank you for joining me again, Dom. Hopefully we get all of our dreams answered this fall with all of the games we're hyped for. Hopefully they meet our expectations. And God, I cannot wait for Halo, man. Oh, I cannot wait.
It looks excellent.
Catch you guys next time. Bye.